What if I told you that the voice in your head, the one narrating your every move, doubting your every choice, rehearsing conversations that never happen, isn't you at all? Beneath it, silent and unmoving, there is something deeper, something ancient, something that has never once been touched by your fears or desires. And yet for most of your life, you've mistaken the noise for yourself and forgotten the stillness that holds it. The man walks through life believing he is this voice. It tells him who to love, who to hate, what to chase, and what to avoid. When the voice is cruel, he calls himself broken. When the voice flatters him, he calls himself powerful. He obeys it blindly because no one has ever told him that the voice is only an echo, a fragment, a shadow. The woman carries the same illusion. Her thoughts spiral in anxious patterns, narrating every glance, every silence, every shift of energy in the room. She feels unseen, unloved, unworthy, and assumes that this must be the truth. She has forgotten that the mind is only a mirror, and mirrors cannot speak of what they reflect. They only repeat. Carl Jung called it the ego, the mask you wear to meet the world, the persona that learns to survive by controlling, by pleasing, by pretending. But the ego, for all its cunning, is terrified of silence. Silence exposes it. Silence shows you that beneath the costume of your identity lies something vast and nameless. Alan Watts spoke of this often, that you are not a separate being lost in an indifferent universe. You are the universe, pretending to be a person. The mind, with all its chatter, is like a ripple on the surface of the ocean. But you are the depth, the stillness beneath the wave. The tragedy is how easily we forget. In childhood, there was no voice yet, no ceaseless commentary. A child simply is. The wind blows, they laugh. Rain falls, they reach out their hands. There is no past to regret, no future to fear. But as the years harden into memory, the voice grows louder. Parents scold, teachers compare, lovers abandon. The voice collects each wound and weaves it into a story. I am not enough. I must become more. I must be loved to be real. This story, repeated endlessly, becomes the prison. You've felt it, haven't you? That strange emptiness, even in moments of triumph. The lingering loneliness, even when you're surrounded by people. That gnawing thought whispered at night when you're finally alone. Is this all I am? The Stoics understood this suffering well. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Yet few realize what this means. It is not about controlling the voice in your head. It is about seeing it for what it is, a trick of perception, not the essence of you. When a woman begins to see this, something extraordinary happens. The patterns of need that once controlled her start to loosen. She stops seeking validation from men who cannot love her. She stops defining herself by the attention she receives or the silence that wounds her. She begins to sense, faintly at first, that there is a part of her untouched by all of it. And when a man wakes to this truth, the grip of his shadow softens. He no longer clings to dominance or approval. He stops running from vulnerability because he sees for the first time that the self he feared losing never truly existed. This is not an easy awakening. The ego fights to survive. It feeds on chaos, on comparison, on constant doing. It will whisper that silence is dangerous, that stillness means death. And yet, only in silence can you finally hear the life you've been missing. So pause, listen closely, not to the voice, but to what holds it. The quiet awareness beneath the thought, the space between each breath. There, in that stillness, the forgotten truth begins to emerge. You are not the storm in your mind. You are the sky it moves through. The realization does not come with fireworks. It arrives like dawn, slow, quiet, inevitable, a soft unveiling rather than a conquest. And yet, once it begins, life is never the same. Because suddenly you see what was always hidden in plain sight. The voice in your head has never been you. It was never the core of your being, only the echo of what the world told you to be. The words of parents who wanted obedience, lovers who wanted devotion, and a society that thrives on your hunger to prove yourself. The tragedy: you've spent years polishing this mask, perfecting it, defending it, mistaking it for who you are, while the real you waited patiently beneath the noise. Jung called this buried self the self with a capital S, the totality of who you are beyond persona and shadow. Not the fragmented ego, but the quiet center that holds both light and dark. It is the part of you that existed before anyone taught you shame, and the part that will remain long after every story you've told yourself dissolves. But awakening to this self is not comfortable. It demands that you confront everything you've been avoiding. The feminine must face her longing to be chosen, to be adored, to be completed by another. The masculine must face his compulsion to conquer, to achieve, to dominate in order to feel worthy. Both must face the grief of realizing how much of life was spent asleep. And grief it is. The death of an illusion always feels like dying. The ego screams as it cracks, terrified that without its drama there will be nothing left. But what remains once the scream fades is not emptiness, it is freedom. Alan Watts likened it to waking from a dream. The realization that the dreamer and the dream are the same, that the voice narrating the dream, I am this, I am that, I must become, was never more than a ripple on the ocean of your being. Consider the patterns you've carried, the way you've sought love in places that starved you, the way you've silenced your own needs to be accepted, the way you've performed endlessly for an audience that never truly existed. Every pattern was born from the same illusion. I am the voice in my head. I am my thoughts. I am my wounds. But what happens when that illusion shatters? A woman once defined by the attention she received begins to see beyond it. No longer hypnotized by the highs and lows of external validation, she feels an inner stillness blooming, terrifying in its simplicity. She discovers a love not dependent on approval, not conditional on performance, a love that simply is. A man once enslaved by the pursuit of status feels the same shift. For the first time, he rests. The endless climbing loses its grip. He realizes that nothing outside himself can add to or subtract from what he already is. This shift is not about passivity. It is not about abandoning desire or action. It is about no longer mistaking the means for the self. Life continues. Love, loss, ambition, creation, but the center remains unshaken. The Stoics called this apatheia, a calm resilience born not from indifference, but from alignment. When the inner self is no longer chained to external tides, joy and sorrow alike can pass through without distortion. Yet few make this leap, because to see the truth is to lose the comfort of the story. And most would rather suffer the familiar pain of their illusions than risk the terror of the unknown. But you, hearing this now, feel it, don't you? That quiet pull towards something deeper, that knowing, however faint, that there is more to you than the endless commentary in your mind. So ask yourself, without judgment, without rushing for answers, who am I beneath the voice? Who am I when the thoughts fall silent? Stay with that question, not to find an answer, but to remember. Because remembrance, not achievement, is the path back home. The remembrance begins quietly, like a whisper you cannot unhear. At first, it is disorienting. The familiar voice, the one that narrated your worth and dictated your every move, suddenly feels foreign. Its commands no longer hold the same power. Its accusations sound hollow. And in that gap, something vast begins to breathe. But before the awakening comes peace, it brings chaos. The ego does not die gracefully. It claws and resists. It will flood you with fear, insisting that without it you are nothing. That if you let go of your story, your accomplishments, your wounds, your identity, you will vanish. And in a way, it is right that you will vanish. But what emerges is far greater. Jung spoke of this moment as confronting the shadow, the hidden parts of yourself you've denied and disowned, the jealousy you pretend not to feel, the rage you hide behind politeness, the ache for love you cover with pride. To awaken is to look directly at these ghosts, not with judgment, but with recognition. Yes, this too is me. The woman feels it most in her longing. She has spent years seeking completion in another, the masculine who might finally see her, hold her, make her whole. But as she peels back the illusion, she sees that no man could ever give her what she has not yet given herself, her own presence, her own seeing. The man feels it in his drive. He has built and conquered, gathered trophies and titles, only to find the same hollowness waiting in every victory. He realizes that all along he was not chasing success. He was fleeing the silence within himself. And now there is nowhere left to run. Alan Watts described this moment as falling backward into yourself. The very thing you feared, stillness, silence, surrender, becomes the doorway to freedom. The boundaries between self and world blur. The voice still speaks, but it no longer rules. Thoughts arise like clouds. They drift, dissolve, reform. But you are the sky. And something extraordinary happens when you no longer mistake yourself for the voice. The craving for validation softens. You no longer beg to be chosen because you have already chosen yourself. Relationships shift, not because you need less love, but because you no longer confuse love with approval. You stop performing. You stop grasping. You begin to live from a center that cannot be taken or destroyed. The Stoics knew this liberation well. Epictetus wrote, "Man is disturbed not by things, but by the view he takes of them." When the view changes, suffering dissolves. Not because life is suddenly perfect, but because you stop insisting it must be. Notice this in your own life. The moments of anxiety, of craving, of longing, all arise from the same place. Identification with the voice, the belief that its thoughts are reality, that its fears are truth. But when you see the voice for what it is, transient, conditioned, unreal, the grip loosens. This does not mean silence forever. The mind will still chatter, old patterns will still echo, but you will no longer drown in them. You will watch like one watching waves crash against the shore, knowing the shore itself is never moved. For the feminine, this shift is a reclamation of her own presence. She no longer waits for him to see her. She no longer bleeds herself dry to prove her worth. In the stillness, she remembers she has always been enough. For the masculine, this shift is a softening of his armor. He no longer measures himself by conquest or control. In the stillness, he remembers strength was never the absence of vulnerability, but the courage to remain open in its presence. And together, within one soul or between two, a new way of being emerges. Not love born of need, but love born of wholeness. Not connection born of fear, but connection born of presence. The voice does not vanish overnight, but the awakening has begun. And once it begins, there is no going back. There is a strange grief that follows awakening, not for what is lost, but for what was never truly lived. You look back at the years spent running in circles, chasing approval, hiding from silence, and it feels almost unbearable. How much of life was wasted performing for a voice that was never real? Yet this grief is holy. It softens the heart. It strips away arrogance. It makes room for something deeper to emerge. Humility, reverence, gratitude for the smallest things. The sound of rain on the window, the warmth of sunlight on your face, the presence of another human being without expectation or demand. Carl Jung described individuation, the process of becoming whole, as a descent before it is a rise. You must walk into the underworld of your own psyche. You must confront the shadow, embrace the unloved parts, retrieve the innocence you abandoned to survive. Only then can you ascend with what you've reclaimed. The woman discovers her shadow in the places she was told to hide. Her anger, her sensuality, her hunger for freedom. She was taught that goodness meant being small, agreeable, soft. But as she reclaims these buried aspects, she becomes something untamed, not cruel, but whole. A feminine force no longer split between light and dark. The man encounters his shadow in the vulnerability he has long feared. He was taught that manhood meant control, dominance, emotional restraint. But as he faces the tender boy inside him, the one who longed to be held, the one who feared being seen, his strength deepens. It becomes rooted, not rigid. Alan Watts often spoke of this paradox, that to awaken is not to transcend humanity, but to fully embody it, to feel deeply without clinging, to love fiercely without possession, to participate in life's drama, knowing all the while that it is a play. And so awakening does not erase suffering. It transforms your relationship to it. Pain still comes, but it no longer defines you. Fear arises, but it passes through like weather. Even joy is no longer clung to. It is tasted, savored, released. This is the forgotten truth. You were never meant to control the storm. You were meant to remember you are the sky. The Stoics lived by this knowings. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. But strength here is not hard, not clenched. It is fluid. A river flowing around the rocks rather than breaking against them. You begin to notice subtle shifts. The arguments that once hooked you lose their power. The criticism that once pierced you now dissolves before it lands. The longing to prove yourself fades, not because you've given up, but because you've remembered there was nothing to prove. For the feminine, this means she no longer waits for permission to bloom. She moves from overflow rather than emptiness. She no longer clutches at love. She offers it freely, knowing it cannot be taken from her. For the masculine, it means he no longer needs to conquer to feel alive. He stands still and discovers a quiet strength that does not shout, does not threaten, but radiates from the core. He leads not by control, but by presence. Together, when both awaken, love changes shape. It is no longer a bargain. I will give if you give. It is no longer a performance. I will be lovable if I meet your needs. It becomes two complete beings meeting in freedom, not fear. And from this place, life itself begins to feel different. Colors sharper, time slower, even pain sacred. Because beneath every moment runs a deeper current. The knowing that you were never the voice. You were the silence that heard it, always. At first, this silence feels unnatural. It is too still, too open, as though standing on a cliff edge with no railings. The mind, addicted to noise, panics. It will try to pull you back into the old story. Think harder, plan more, worry, or you will be unprepared. But gradually, as you stay with the silence, you begin to realize this is not emptiness, it is presence. Presence is not passive. It does not mean withdrawing from life. It means being so deeply rooted in what is real that illusions cannot sway you. The voice may shout, but it no longer dictates your choices. You hear it, but you do not obey. Carl Jung described this as integrating the opposites within, the conscious and unconscious, the masculine and feminine, the light and shadow. Awakening is not about erasing the voice, but knowing it for what it is, a fragment, not the whole, a wave, not the ocean. The feminine, in her awakening, learns to sit with her longing without letting it rule her. She feels the ache for love, yet no longer confuses it with lack. She begins to love without clutching, to give without erasing herself. There is power in this, a quiet magnetism that comes not from performing, but from simply being. The masculine in his awakening learns to stand in his vulnerability without shame. He feels his fear of inadequacy, yet no longer masks it with bravado. He discovers a strength that does not need to dominate, a strength rooted in presence, not control. This presence is what allows him to meet the feminine, not as conqueror, but as equal. Alan Watts spoke of this union often, the dance of polarities, yin and yang, giving and receiving. True love, he said, is not possession, but play. Two beings meeting not to complete each other, but to celebrate what is already whole. Yet this wholeness cannot be faked. It arises only when you stop searching for yourself in the reflections of others. It emerges when you remember, deeply, viscerally, that you were never the voice to begin with. Notice how life shifts when you live from this knowing. The criticisms that once wounded you feel lighter because you see they belong to the critic, not you. The compliments that once inflated you lose their hold because they too are only reflections. The dance of approval and rejection quiets, and in the quiet you finally breathe. This is what the Stoics understood as freedom, not the absence of pain, but the absence of enslavement to it. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." How true this becomes when the voice is seen for what it is, imagination. Freedom, then, is not in silencing the voice, but in no longer mistaking it for truth. And here, a strange beauty arises. Life becomes softer, yet deeper. You begin to savor small moments, the weight of your own breath, the warmth of sunlight, the stillness between heartbeats. Even suffering carries meaning, no longer feared, but embraced as part of the whole. For the feminine, this shift is liberation. She no longer waits to be seen by him or by anyone. She sees herself wholly without apology. She moves through life not in pursuit of love, but as love itself. For the masculine, this shift is peace. He no longer measures his worth by conquest or comparison. He leads quietly, not from ego, but from grounded clarity. His presence calms rather than commands. And together, whether within one soul or between two, this awakening creates a new way of loving, living, and being. A love not bound by fear, but liberated by truth. The voice still speaks. It always will, but now you listen differently. You smile at its drama, its urgency, its desperate need to be real. And in that smile, something shifts forever. You are no longer the prisoner. You are the witness. You are no longer the voice. You are the silence that holds it. There is a strange paradox in this silence. The more deeply you root yourself in it, the more vividly alive everything else becomes. Sounds sharpen, colors bloom, even the smallest gestures, a hand brushing past yours, a bird cutting through the sky, feel drenched in meaning. Life, once dulled by constant commentary, awakens in its rawest form. And yet, this awakening does not remove pain. It transforms your relationship to it. Pain comes and goes like weather. It passes through you instead of defining you. Even longing softens. No longer a desperate grasping, but a quiet ache that points you toward depth. Carl Jung believed that the goal of life was individuation, the integration of all parts of the psyche into a harmonious whole. Not perfection, but wholeness. This means embracing the contradictions, the strong and the fragile, the loving and the fearful, the chaos and the calm. True maturity is found not in erasing the shadow, but in befriending it. The feminine rediscovers her shadow in this silence, the wildness she was taught to suppress, her anger, her hunger, her boundless love. These are no longer flaws to be tamed, but sacred forces to be honored. She stops performing sweetness and begins embodying truth. In this truth, she finds a magnetism far deeper than charm, a radiance born of wholeness. The masculine rediscovers his tenderness, the quiet boy within who longed to be held, who feared being seen. As he welcomes this vulnerability, his strength deepens. No longer fragile behind armor, he becomes soft yet unshakable, grounded yet free. Alan Watts called this the dance. Life is not a problem to be solved, but a melody to be played. Masculine and feminine, shadow and light, rise and fall, not to cancel each other out, but to create harmony. The awakening is realizing you are both the dancer and the music, the ocean and the wave, Notice how relationships shift in this space. The old dynamics, grasping, performing, controlling, fall away. Love ceases to be a transaction. It becomes presence meeting presence. Two whole beings who do not need each other, but choose each other. And in that choice, love deepens. The Stoics knew this quiet strength well. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. Awakening strips life back to this simplicity, the privilege of existence itself, the miracle of being. But few will follow you here. The world runs on noise, thrives on distraction, worships the voice. It fears the silence because silence reveals the truth, that so much of what we chase is unnecessary. So much of what we fear is illusion. To live awake is to walk a lonely road at first. Yet in that solitude, something precious is born, sovereignty. Sovereignty is not isolation. It is freedom from compulsion. It is the end of begging for permission to exist. It is moving through life with open hands, able to give, able to receive, yet needing neither to feel whole. The feminine, sovereign in her being, no longer waits to be chosen. She chooses herself, and in that choosing radiates a quiet magnetism. The masculine, sovereign in his presence, no longer seeks conquest. He becomes stillness itself, a mountain unmoved by storms, yet alive to every whisper of the wind. And when they meet in one soul or between two, it is no longer for completion, but celebration. Not I need you, but I see you. This is the forgotten truth you were born knowing and taught to forget. You are not the voice in your head. You are the awareness that hears it. And once you remember, the game changes forever. There comes a point where the silence no longer feels foreign. It becomes home. The voice still speaks, but its urgency fades like distant echoes in a vast canyon. The stories it spins about who you should be, what you must achieve, whom you must impress, lose their power. You listen, but you do not believe. This is where life begins to soften, not because the world has changed, but because your relationship to it has. Chaos still exists. Heartbreak still comes, but they no longer define you. You are no longer the storm. You are the sky that holds it. Carl Jung wrote that wholeness is found when opposites unite, not by erasing conflict, but by holding it. The awakened self is vast enough to contain contradiction, the longing and the fulfillment, the fear and the courage, the grief and the gratitude. Nothing is exiled. Everything belongs. For the feminine, this is a profound reclamation. She is no longer split between what the world calls good and what it calls too much. She embodies both, soft and fierce, nurturing and wild. She no longer edits herself to be palatable. She moves as truth. For the masculine, it is a deep grounding. He is no longer enslaved by endless striving. He no longer hides his tenderness behind walls. He embodies both, protector and poet, strength and surrender. He leads not by command, but by presence. Alan Watts often described this awakening as remembering the play. Life is not a ladder to climb, but a dance to join. The ego wants to win. The soul wants to participate. When you stop taking the voice so seriously, the dance returns. Even pain becomes part of the rhythm. This shift changes everything, especially love. No longer do you grasp at partners to fill a void. No longer do you contort yourself to be chosen. Love ceases to be a negotiation of wounds and becomes a meeting of presences. Two whole beings who choose each other, not from need, but from overflow. The Stoics would call this freedom, a life where peace is not dependent on outcomes. Seneca wrote, "He is most powerful who has power over himself." To awaken is to realize that nothing external, not love, not success, not approval, can grant or revoke your worth. And so you begin to live differently, simpler, slower. The smallest details become sacred. The warmth of a morning sunbeam, the weight of breath in your chest, the quiet between words. Gratitude emerges unforced, not as a practice, but as a natural state. The voice still murmurs, of course, it always will. But now you smile at it. You thank it for its concern. You let it pass like clouds across a vast sky. You no longer fight the mind nor obey it. You simply watch. And this watching is liberation. For the feminine, liberation is no longer needing to be rescued. She carries her own light into the darkness. For the masculine, liberation is no longer needing to prove himself. He rests in a quiet strength beyond validation. When they meet in union or in the mirror of their own soul, love becomes play, not possession. Freedom, not fear. A shared presence where nothing needs to be fixed. Nothing needs to be earned. This is the forgotten truth. You are not the voice. You are the awareness that hears it. You are the silence between thoughts. You are the stillness beneath the storm. And from that stillness, everything changes. The awakening arrives not with thunder, but with quiet inevitability. A soft unraveling of every story you ever clung to. The striving, the proving, the endless chase for worth in the eyes of another. One by one, these illusions fall away. And what remains is startling in its simplicity. You were never broken. You were never lacking. You were never the voice in your head. Carl Jung called this return to wholeness, the completion of the journey inward. The union of shadow and light, masculine and feminine, conscious and unconscious, individuation. To reach this place is not to escape life, but to meet it fully as it is. The feminine, now whole, moves differently. No longer does she shrink to be loved or expand to be chosen. She radiates a quiet confidence born not from praise, but from presence. Her longing softens into openness. Her love no longer a plea, but an offering. She carries both her softness and her fire without apology. The masculine, now whole, stands differently. No longer does he chase conquest to feel alive or hide his tenderness behind walls of steel. His strength is steady, unforced, rooted in self-awareness. He no longer leads from ego, but from grounded clarity, an anchor in the storm, yet free enough to dance with the wind. Alan Watts often said that to awaken is to remember the play. Life remains unpredictable, beautiful, devastating, but you no longer mistake it for something you must control. You join the dance knowing the steps are improvised, trusting the rhythm that moves through everything. This is where love transforms. No longer two halves searching for completion, but two wholes meeting in celebration. No grasping, no bargaining, only presence, only freedom. A love that says, I see you, not as I wish you to be, but as you are. The Stoics understood this as true resilience, the ability to face life's highs and lows with an unshaken core. Marcus Aurelius wrote, the universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it. Now, the voice in your head may still speak, but it no longer dictates your life. Its fears are heard, but not obeyed. Its judgments arise, but pass through like clouds. You begin to notice something extraordinary. Life feels lighter, simpler. Even the pain holds beauty because you no longer resist it. You no longer demand constant answers, constant validation, constant control. You are finally home in yourself. And in this homecoming, something shifts forever. The woman who once waited to be seen no longer waits. She sees herself, and in that seeing, everything else changes. The man who once sought the world's approval no longer seeks. He rests in the quiet knowing of his own worth. Together or alone, they live awake, they live whole, they live free. This is the forgotten truth, the one buried beneath layers of noise and fear. You are not the voice in your head. You are the silence that holds it. You are the awareness that listens. You are the vastness that has always been free. And what once felt like loss now breathes like liberation.